Welcome to the What Paramedics Want podcast series of Inside EMS, sponsored by Pulsara. Whether replacing radio reports, alerting specialty teams, or managing mass casualty incidents, Pulsara simplifies communication, one tool every day, regardless of the event. Here it is once again. It's time to go inside EMS. I am your host, Chris Cebollero, and with me always is the charismatic, the personable, the great character that we like to call KG, Kelly Grayson. What's going on?
Oh man, just another day in paradise. It's opening day of goose season in the North Country, and we managed to kill a few geese. My blood pressure is lower. My outlook on life has improved. So
It was pretty poor up until this point, so I'm glad that it's improved. Yeah. So
I'm even starting to like you. I'm in such a good mood.
Thank you so much. That's really nice. Maybe we should send you out there every week. Just don't go hunting with Dick Cheney. So, Kelly, we did a show on the 10 signs of a bad manager, and we got a lot of feedback. I mean, we got a lot of people who were sending us emails saying, it was a good show, and they offered some of the other traits, and one of them was emotional intelligence we didn't hit on. Certainly when you have a leader who's going off the rails, and I was one of those leaders, and I've made no qualms about it, that I took my ego a little bit too personally. And people will say to me now, well, you're a good leader. Well, you see me now, but if you would have saw me then, you wouldn't want to follow me either. But
it's been a work in progress.
Exactly. I think we all are as we go forward. You think about Maslow's hierarchy of need, where you get to the top peak is self-actualization. When do you actually get there? And isn't it a constant journey that you never really get there? We become the best version of yourself. But, one of the things that we said we would do at the end of the show is we have 10 signs of a poor employee that we wanted to kind of be fair and we wanted to talk about as well. Mm-hmm. So today we're going to bring you those 10, and let's go ahead and just start it off as we go. And I think number one is something that is not thought about as a bad characteristic, but it should be the precursor when this starts to happen, and that's bad attendance. When we think about attendance issues, Kelly, I mean, it's not uncommon in our business, and we never know. Sometimes we know the people who are going to call out because of all the other things that we're going to talk about. But when someone is feeling that they have poor leadership, there's a toxic work environment, they're a disengaged workforce, and the Gallup organization, who does all things employee engagement, they will tell you that close to 70% of our workforce is either disengaged or actively disengaged. And I've said for years on this show that our job as leaders is to get work done through other people. And the true measurement of leadership success is how engaged, satisfied, and productive the workforce is. Yeah. And if 70% of our workforce is either disengaged or actively disengaged, how are we going to be successful? But anyway, let's get back on the point. We know those people who have bad attendance. I got to tell you, man,
everyone knows.
I've called in a couple times myself where maybe I shouldn't have, but this is the first sign that you may have a bad employee.
Yeah. This is attendance issues are usually the harbinger of worse things to come. That's the first red flag, I think, of a dissatisfied or disengaged employee. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows the people at an agency. If it's small enough, the people who can be counted to show up, even when they're not in a great mood, they've got other things to do, they will show up to work. And you've got other folks that maybe they're sick or maybe they're not, but they can't be relied to show up to work on a regular basis, and they are the bane of not only supervisors but the other crew members that have to fill in for them and backfill when they're short of a truck.
Yeah, I mean, when you work in a high performance EMS system and you're supposed to have 25 trucks on the street for your peak time, and now you've got 5 people that have called off, those 20 people are going to be running some calls, right? And again, that just feeds into the toxic environment, that just feeds into the behavior. But those employees don't care anything about their team, don't care anything about the mission, just themselves. And that goes into our number 2 thing, our number 2 sign, Kelly, and that is poor productivity. And that's poor productivity in patient care. That's poor productivity in making sure your ambulance has all the supplies on it. That's poor productivity when they're not taking the trash out or restocking, whatever it is. And it's another sign that we have to be able to figure out, right? So now if we start to think about that you're in a place where you may not want to do these little things, wash your ambulance. I mean, at the
Yeah.
end of your shift, you're working 12 hours, you're working 24 hours. Do you really want to do these things? You know what? It's part of the job. There was a saying that said, it's not over till the paperwork is done. What's not over till the ambulance is ready for the next day?
Yeah, and I think that shirking and being unproductive or doing less than your best on clinical care and taking care of patients probably the last thing to go if it ever goes. Many people will quit before they get to that point, but there's a whole lot of poor productivity that you can see in people neglecting their station duties. They don't inventory their trucks. They don't do their rig check. They don't wash their truck. They don't particularly care if their truck is clean or not. And that rolling billboard of the company, they don't care enough about the company's image to keep the truck clean, to keep themselves well presented.
Yeah.
You know, I I can see that. I've been that person. I try not to be that person, but almost every time that happened, I was disengaged. I was had things going on. I was suffering through burnout, and I had to seek a way to rejuvenate myself and get my head straight. But yeah, it shows up. It shows up when you look at all the things that are not real, you think are not essential to patient care. Documentation, keeping your ambulance stocked, all that kind of stuff. You
So
just
was
you
it
tell yourself
burnout?
that those things don't matter, huh?
Was it burnout that got you there? I mean, how'd you get to that
It
point?
was several. I've had burnout and career rejuvenation several times. You
Mhm.
just you come to recognize the signs and you step back from it a little bit. I used to say that I would work in ambulance until I started hating patients, and then I would start teaching, and I taught until I started hating students, and I go back to the ambulance. But I've been doing both for the last 10 or 15 years, so sometimes it's hard to get away. But
Interesting.
the
Yeah.
the last year I was at Acadian Ambulance was the only year that I haven't gotten the top tier or the next tier pay raise and gotten glowing, recommendations because quite
They were
frankly,
afraid of you. They were afraid of you.
no, I was phoning it in. I was in a bad mental and emotional state, but I was also physically debilitated. I had the PE
Oh, that's
and
yeah,
I
yeah. I
was
know what you're
still
talking
getting
about. Yeah.
back from the spinal surgery and I just hurt every day and walking was a chore. So uh, better place now, but I wasn't a real good employee. I certainly wasn't a very productive employee at Acadian Ambulance. So, I see myself in some of these
Yeah.
things.
Well, I mean, I think always, I mean, I'm sitting
Yeah.
here to tell
If
you
you're
too.
if you're emotionally intelligent and honest with yourself,
Yeah.
you probably see yourself in some of these things.
And I think you have to. And there's nothing that we're not going to talk about today that I haven't experienced as
Yeah.
well. And it's just it's the grind sometimes that gets you, right? I mean, it's the 14 calls in a 12-hour period, the 22 calls, in a 24-hour period that is constant over your shifts. If you work 24 hours, it kind of screws you up. I worked 4 12-hour shifts and I was up for those calls and all these things lay in, which brings us to number three, Kelly, and that's a harmful attitude. And
Yeah.
this is really people that have negative attitudes and that really, we talked about, the disengaged, actively disengaged. This is where the actively disengaged people come into because not only are they not engaged, but they're now
They're trying
being
to,
subversive, right?
yeah,
Into trying to
undermine you.
submarine the success of the organization.
Yeah.
And they're doing it quietly or they're doing it, covertly with whispers. And but we think about it, and I've had people that have had really bad attitudes that I've said, I'm just not going to listen to that on the truck today. You could have a negative attitude, but have it tomorrow, man. Let's just try to have the best day that we can because I can't listen to you, right? And one of the things that I would think is I talked about having, all these bad traits. A harmful attitude really was I caught myself a couple times, saying I don't care, or I would be judgmental with the patients. There was a
Yeah.
woman who was beat up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had the audacity to say to her, "Well, if you weren't in this part of town." But who the heck am I to say that to somebody who just got beat up by some guy, right?
I've worked for 30 years in EMS, and in that time, I worked with maybe two truly bad attitude, toxic, foul individuals that did not belong in the profession, and their humanity was questionable as well. The rest of them, and many of them were labeled problem children by other supervisors and other employees, and they didn't really have bad attitudes at the core. What they had was poor communication between them and the supervisors. They had legitimate beefs with things going on at the agency that was not addressed. And when you're in an agency and you have concerns, and those concerns you feel are ignored by management, and you get nasty about that, or you get a bad attitude because of that, that's not you. That's a reflection of poor management. And many of them were labeled as having bad attitudes.
Yeah, I disagree with
because
you.
that was their demeanor, and no one taught them a better way.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about emotional intelligence, and quite a few of them didn't have any emotional intelligence. They never looked at how they react to things, and the image, the demeanor they project to people. And when gently shown that's what they're doing, they change their ways. And if you're willing to change that, if you look at yourself and willing to change that, that's the opposite of a bad attitude. To me, that's a good attitude.
Well, you
It's
said
just that their things were misdirected rather than just bad.
well, one of the things you said that I disagree with, you said it's not a reflection on them. It is a reflection on them. And you've heard me say a lot of times that other people can't dictate your professionalism. So if they dictate your professionalism, it is your fault. So, all right, number 4,
let me rebut that, but
Okay.
we'll move on. But what I should have probably said is that rarely does harmful attitude happen in a vacuum. There's quite often a reason for it. We do have the
Agreed.
ability
Yeah.
we control our professionalism, but rarely does a bad attitude happen in a vacuum. It usually is a reflection of something else.
Yeah. So number 4 is lack of communication skills. You know, we could sit here and we could talk about the lack of communication skills, but you really have to be able to get your thoughts out. You really have to be able to use constructive or corrective feedback. And a lot of times what happens here, Kelly, is that when we try to get our skills out and try to talk about it, it falls on deaf ears, and then we just stop. But let's jump to number 5.
Yeah.
A person's undependable. They never finish their projects. They miss deadlines. They fail their responsibilities, and hence they fail the team, which then affects the organization. But we know those undependable employees, don't we?
Yeah, they're the type that no one ever trusts. You know, if you arrive on a scene with them and they tell you assessment findings, you're going to check behind them because
120
you can't
over 80.
rely on them. Yeah. That blood pressure always in 0, or God forbid, they got a manual sphygmanometer in their hand and they're giving you odd numbers. Yeah, those people are problems. I don't know. As a supervisor, I don't know how I would necessarily deal with that. It's probably a failing of mine that I don't really know how to motivate or teach work ethic to someone that apparently doesn't have one.
Well, I think a lot of times, though,
bad supervisor if I would say that person needs to be elsewhere. We can't depend on him.
well, I think that one of the things you want to be able to do is to figure out why they're independable. Is it because they have a lack of self-confidence? Is it because they have a lack of self-esteem? Is it because they don't know how to do the project? Did we define what excellence was? Our job is to teach people as well, and not just give them something to do. So
Right.
if I find that somebody's undependable, I want to try to get to the core of that, and it's my job to help them be dependable. But if I give you something that's in your skill set that you don't do, that's a little bit different story. But Kelly, it's about that time. Let's go ahead and take a quick break.
Yep.
When we come back on the other side, we will give you 6 through 10 of the 10 signs of a bad employee.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Pulsara scales to meet your dynamic communication needs. From routine patient alerts to managing large-scale emergencies, every responder and clinician connect seamlessly. Familiar yet powerful, Pulsara streamlines your response from routine transfers to regional disasters. It's one tool every day, regardless of the event. Discover more at Pulsara.com. We are back, and we are bad, and we are doing a great job of talking about the 10 signs.
We're nationwide.
Exactly. And one of the things that or internationally wide, and one of the things that I want to talk about is, and as we sit here And as we outline the 10 signs of a bad manager in last week's show, we outlined the 10 signs of a bad employee. I got to be honest with you. I've had a couple of these characteristics in my career, right? And
Me too.
a lot of times we fall into that. But number 6 on the 10 signs is no respect for leaders and no respect for teammates. And one of the
Man,
things
why
that
you
we
got to
have
get personal like that,
yeah,
man?
exactly, man. But one of the things that I think this falls into is ego, right? There are people out there who think they are God's gift to EMS, they are God's gift to women, they are God's gift to everything, and they just have a bad attitude and don't respect the people who are around them. But
Yeah.
respect also falls into the fact when you are not trying to learn who your teammates are. And, when we hire people, we invite them into the organization to help us be successful. I want to say that again. We invite these people into our organization to help us be successful. And then we put them in a corner and we say, raise your hand if you have a problem. Our job now is to take that person from point A to point B, to help them grow, to help them reach their goals. Because when they grow, the organization grows. But when we don't do that, and they think that they are the best thing since sliced bread, no respect for leaders, no respect for teammates.
Yeah. And, this is, I said that, ouch, that hurts because I have been that person. I don't think I've ever been openly disrespectful to a supervisor, but as someone who is not lacking in confidence, and some might even say arrogance and fairly, I have worked for some supervisors and for some operations managers who I quite frankly thought were not worthy of the job position they held, and that I could have done a better job than they did. And that affected my motivation a lot. I had to constantly rein myself in to not openly show my disrespect. But that goes back to no one else can dictate your professionalism. I made a vow long ago that no matter how much I disliked where I might be working or the people I worked for, as long as I was cashing their paychecks, I was going to keep my mouth shut in public about it. I might gripe all I want to in an employee meeting, but I'm not going to tell people outside the company, bad information or run down my supervisors or managers. But yeah, I've been there, and the people that say that kind of stuff openly are corrosive to the morale of the environment, and to my mind, they really can't stay.
Yeah, let me ask you this question though. You said you've not outwardly shown disrespect to leaders. Have you shown outward disrespect to dispatch? Don't answer, but because that's teammates as well. So it's not, you just can't, put
Okay.
yourself on.
No, let me put this.
No, I don't want to talk
I
about
have reflected outward disrespect to dispatchers.
Okay.
I, to my mind, I don't think I've ever been nasty to a dispatcher first.
I'd be interested in
But
what they say.
I've been nasty back, and I'm usually better at being nasty than they are. So
I'm sure.
yeah.
All right, number 7, does not like change. And I don't know that this is a bad sign, a sign of
The
a
only
bad
one that
employee.
likes change is a wet baby.
Yeah. And the only thing that we can be sure of is that change is going to occur, right? And usually there's a couple things. There's a great study out of Stanford University that shows that people don't like change. And one of the reasons is they don't trust their leader to get them through the change, right? Which I think is very, 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 very eye-opening. But it's always behind the scenes of trying to create this harmony in the face of change. They're negative. They talk about processes. They talk about people. They talk about the change of performance, and they go kicking and screaming. And you know what this comes down to is this comes down to poor communication with the leaders from the leadership that change needs to occur. Now, in an organization, for you to stay progressive, for you to stay dynamic, change is going to happen. EMS, we know that protocols will change and processes will change and how we treat people are going to change. And we have to be able to prepare the workforce that our organization is going to be all about change and being the best that it could be. And if we're not doing that, and if we're not allowing the people who are doing the work to assist us in creating the change, we're going to open up a Pandora's box to find a can of worms.
That is that is an excellent point. If you want to get your workforce to embrace change, make them a part of determining the change and help them shape the change of the company. And you get them invested, and they don't resist change anymore. They feel like they have ownership of it.
And one of the
You
things that
see
I've
this.
always said, Kelly, just to cut you off, is I don't consider myself to be a paramedic anymore. I have my certification still that I've gotten all those years ago, but I consider myself to be an administrator, and I have no right to change a process of the workforce without them being part of that discussion.
And that makes you an actually fairly unusual manager or leader, fairly unusual administrator. And God, if we only had more of you. But you see this not liking change reflected in clinically in the way paramedics practice. And I've said for many, many years, if you're practicing the way you were even 5 years ago, you're doing it wrong. The only constant in our profession is that it will evolve and change. That's the root of my old saying. There's some paramedics with 25 years of experience and many more with 1 year of experience repeated 25 times. And they all, when new protocols roll out or new research leads to a shift in the way we render care, they go, oh, they want us to do it this way. And 5 years from now, we're going to go back to doing it the other way. And the pendulum just swings, and they don't know, they can't decide what they want us to do. And I always ask them, who is they? Who is this amorphous they?
Have them call me.
Yeah, you think there's somebody in an ivory tower somewhere twirling their mustache on how to and hatching evil plots on how to make your job more difficult? No, there is no they. And if there is a they, there's one way you can stop that. You can get off your ass and get committed and active in your profession, and you can become one of they and help steward be a steward of your profession.
Right. Number 8 is they don't take initiative. They do just enough so they don't get fired. This is what they're calling in this day and age the quiet quitting. Just going to lay low. They're just going to do whatever it is. But let's go to number 9, and that is deceitfulness, that this person just does not tell the truth. They're dishonest. They embellish stories. And the way that they tell a story today may not be the way they tell a story tomorrow. And certainly as we confront them with challenges that are going on in the organization, the storytelling starts, and we know those people, and we certainly don't trust them as well.
No, we don't. And to my mind, that's an unconscionable act, is lying about something, falsifying something, fraud. I can't count the number of coworkers who have talked themselves in to disciplinary action or firing by lying about something, or people, when I was a supervisor, ask a subordinate about an issue, and the discipline or the corrective action I had in mind was fairly mild. I was going to look at it as an educational opportunity, a learning, teachable moment. But when they lied about it, just blatantly lied about it, that was the thing that killed it. You talk about harmful employees, harmful attitudes. One of the 2 partners I've ever had that truly had a bad attitude pulled some stupid stunt at the end of one of our shifts, and the supervisor called her on it. And when they called her into the office to talk about her insubordination, she made up a flat out story about me, and they were going to suspend her. When they realized she was willing to throw her partner under the bus and make up a lie that they knew was false, they went ahead and fired her. And to my mind, blatantly lying, and if people can't trust you, you have no place on the truck.
Right. And one of the things that people will say all the time is, are you calling me a liar? And people don't know how to respond to that. And
sometimes I will say, yes, I'm calling you a liar because you're lying.
Or one of the things I'll say is, your story doesn't pass the sniff test, and I will get to the bottom of it, and you will find, and we will determine if you're a liar or not. But you know what? People use that as a means to throw people off. We got to be able to do that. And number 10, finally, is just not being a team player, right? They talk about the organization, they talk about people, they do everything. I talked about the Gallup poll earlier. 17% of people are actively disengaged. That actively disengaged means you are actually trying to undermine the success of the organization, and you're being subversive at every single turn. but this is a person that's not able to work as part of a team, and they're doing whatever they can to ensure that the team is failing. So, but those are one of the things that I really don't like. And being in the military, when we talk about teamwork, we never leave anybody behind. I really have a big problem with people who disrespect the team and who are not ensuring that the team is part of the success of what's going on. You leave your team in the field, you leave your team behind, I lose respect for you automatically.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with that. You see this also in a milder form. You see paramedics that do not respect their EMT partners, and they think that their job is to hand them equipment and to push the stretcher and to help them lift, where they believe that EMT means every menial task or empty my trash. Those people are not team players either, because they're trying to be the lone wolf on the call, and they have someone with
Yeah.
training, hands, and a brain that they do not utilize. To me, being a team player is recognizing that on an ambulance, you are a team, and the other person's contributions are valuable. And you, quite frankly, see a lot of paramedics, the ones that need the help the most, always refuse it. And, it's lack of confidence on their part and projection, but also not team players. But
Right.
man, these are some cogent points about being a bad employee. And it's a little shaming to admit that I have seen myself in some of these things. I like to think that as I grew as a person and as an employee, I rectified some of these deficiencies. But yeah, I've been in those 10 things there.
Yeah, I think I have as well. And what it comes down to, Kelly, too, is no one has ever taught us how to defend ourselves, right? So the way that we defend ourselves is we put our hands up and we fight. There are different ways to do that. There are different ways not to be outward. But I have said 100 times on this show over the years, do not allow anyone to affect your professionalism. You may hate the people you work with. You may hate the leaders that are leading you, but you are allowing their behavior to give you a bad reputation, to give you a bad attitude. And then as the leader of that organization, when you finally get the job you want, they're calling me to say, tell me about Kelly Grayson. And I'm now able to say that you're late, you're unreliable, you're not somebody that I would hire again. And that's what you're doing, is you're developing your reputation based on somebody else, and never, ever do that. But let's go ahead and get up on out of here.
Yeah, excellent points all. And would that some employers would actually do that when they have to part company with a bad employee. All too often they foist them off on someone else and make it the next agency's problem. That's
Right.
something that John Politis calls cross-pollination of assholes. But
It's a family show, Kelly. It's a family show.
Cross-pollination of a-holes. But good points all, and we'd like to hear what you think. Do you have bad employees at your agency? How do you spot them? What attitudes do they display? Do you recognize some of your coworkers among these 10 traits of a bad employee? Give us your thoughts at the show at ems1.com. And for myself and co-host Chris Cebollero, thanks for tuning in to Inside EMS. We're going to catch you guys next week.